Hey, guess what time it is? It's time for Breedinum Radio. Brought to you by Pertnier Outdoors. This is a spring edition, which means it's turkey season, which means there's turkeys out there breeding them. Like getting on top and breeding them. That's what turkeys do. It's pretty cool if you've ever seen it. But anyway, listen to these stories. These are real people from right around the corner who are going out there putting turkeys on the ground. They ain't breeding them no more. You know what I'm saying?
What's happening, everybody? Billy here, and thanks again for joining us. And this will officially be the last Breedinum Radio episode for our spring turkey season here in New York. I think I said that last week, and Jimbo corrected me and said, no, sir, I have one more under my belt. So this is the last episode we'll have for Breedinum Radio, and we'll be coming back with that again this fall for deer season. So I hope you're enjoying this kind of this format we're doing, where we're each week catching up with people that were successful the week prior, hearing their stories, their strategies, how they went about it. So maybe it's something you can jump into the next week and put what you learn to the test in the field. So had a lot of fun with it. I hope you did as well. Definitely continue to appreciate your feedback on all of what we're doing. We want to make sure we're putting out the content that you want and what you want to hear. So that's what we're all about here. I think you kind of get the gist of that as we're about 50 episodes total in, and we're really having a lot of fun with it. So continue to want to get better, and need your help to make sure we're doing what the people want. That's what it's all about. So Big Jim and Dad, so Big Willy, the two of them will be breaking it down here today, going through Big Jim's last week of the season and what all transpired for him to put this bird on the ground. So again, haven't listened to this one yet, but I'm looking forward to listening to it with you all as it gets posted, and hear Jimbo's side of the long side of the story. So just to highlight one more time, our Pertnier Outdoors 2020 Turkey Challenge was a huge hit. We raised over $1,000, $1,150 total. We raised for NWTF. That money all went right directly to them. And everybody out there, that participated, you were all a huge reason for us to be able to obviously raise that money, and felt pretty great to give it back to a good cause. So thank you, everyone, for your participation in that, and your continued participation in the podcast and our social platforms that we have out there. So thanks again for that. We've got I placed an order today for some stickers, so they should be in next week. The ETA is next week. I'll be getting them put up on the website probably in the next week or two, probably a little bit after. I want to wait. The hats, I think, got delayed a little bit with everything going on with the virus, so we should have the hats in sometime here in June, and probably be throwing the stickers up at the same time. So got 3 new stickers that we're putting out, and I think put them up on the store, on the website, and then we'll also have the hats up there as well. So excited to get that stuff rolling. Had a little time to actually get the business side of things squared away and get us official, so we're able to start marching onward and upward. So thanks again, everybody. Enjoy this conversation. I hope you have a great summer and get out there and catch some fish, and we'll continue to start bringing you some whitetail content and some fishing stuff too, and maybe just some general entertainment as we march towards the start of deer season. So thanks, everybody. Have a good one. Thanks for listening.
All right, this week is our final week of Breedinum Radio. I know Billy told all you guys that last week was our final week, but he was full of shit. So we're gonna do one more this week. I had a little luck there end of last week, and we have a special guest on tonight, Senior Willy. We're going to let him do the interview for me. So I'm going to turn it right over to him and let him run with it how he wants, and we'll see how it turns out here in the end. We know he's a talker, so I'm sure it won't be a problem.
Well, thanks for having me, Jim. Looking forward to it. Been enjoying your series of Breedinum Radio, and I have to chuckle because listened to the last week there, and Billy said that was it. We're done, and I thought Breedinum Radio will end when Jimmy says it ends. So here we are doing one more, right?
Yeah, and you
So, hey,
haven't actually hosted a Pert Near Outdoors podcast yet, have you?
I have not. No, I have not had the honor. I've been a guest on occasion, but I have not had the honor of hosting. So thank you for that.
So here you go.
Here I go. Well, I wanted to start off by congratulating you on the your stint here as the host of Breedinum Radio, the spring edition. And I got to tell you, from my perspective, I've listened to them all. Obviously, I get a kick out of you and Billy doing these, and I enjoy listening to them. But even if some other, like we got some other folks that we listen to their podcasts, I think regardless of who did the format, I really enjoyed it. So I just wanted you to know that I think it added a different dimension. Like during deer season, there's all the hype around the deer season, and we're listening to all the different podcasts. And then we did the Breedinum Radio last year, kind of rut forecasting and, reports from around the state. But to do that for turkey really kind of elevated the turkey and added a level of excitement and enjoyment to the season. So well done on that. I really enjoyed it. And that brings us to, every week you've been hosting guests that have been successful in the field. And so after you got your bird last week there, I reached out to you. I said, who's going to host or who's going to interview you next week? Now that you've got a bird, we got to hear your story. So I volunteered and here I am. So why don't you tell us about your day on, I think it was Friday, the 29th of May when you finally connected.
Yeah. So it was the Friday previous to that. I was hunting with my buddy Mike there, and they had a freshly planted field, bean field up behind the house. And I had went out to try to roost some birds in an area that we hadn't tried since the beginning of the season. And I found fresh turkey tracks in the field. I got all excited. I'm like, oh my God, they're here now. This is perfect. So we went there that Friday morning, which was 2 Friday mornings ago. And, of course we sit there, in there nice and early, and the sun's coming up and just nothing's happening. And I throw out a couple of calls and nothing. And we kind of stood up, around 6 o'clock. He had to be gone by 7. And I was like, hey, you want to just take a walk around the woods and we'll throw some calls out and just see what happens? He's like, yeah. He goes, I'm getting used to this. It's a beautiful morning for a walk. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Because, I almost.
That's all you're doing, right? Is going for walks every morning you go out.
Yeah. Other than the first weekend with him, we hadn't heard a gobble in like 5 sits.
Yeah.
So we just went for a walk around the woods and enjoyed ourselves and did some walking and calling. And then I left when he left because I was heading up north for the weekend, Memorial Day weekend. And I was like, well, I'm going to go drive around all the fields I normally drive around and see if there's anything out, because I've been doing it all season and there's nothing there, but you never know.
That's right.
So I went driving down the road, and freaking first field I come to that we normally find them in this time of year, there's 4 strutters right out on the ridge of the plowed field. It was, I think it was a planted field, planted corn. So it was all fresh dirt. It was freaking beautiful ground.
Now, not to stop you, but did you notice that as soon as the farmers were able to finally get on the ground and get going tilling and planting, that them birds went right about the same time the green fields started greening up, because things were running so late. We didn't have good green fields. And I would have thought they'd have been in the green fields chasing bugs, and they were in the dirt fields.
Yeah. So what's weird is the green fields, I feel like, their winter wheat and your hay, I feel like they went from nothing to need a waist high where they don't want to hang out, like in the matter of no time. So some of the fields we normally hunt were so overgrown that I sat one of them one day and I saw the red head bopping through the field, but they're not out there strutting or anything. So right. Definitely I agree with you. Once they worked some ground and planted, all of a sudden you started seeing birds in the fields. And because I went a good 2-week stretch in the middle of the season without seeing any birds in any of the fields.
Yeah.
But I saw those 4 strutters and I instantly called Mike, and I'm like, he's like, where are they? And I'm like, they're right where they always are. And he's like, son of a bitch. I'm like, I know, we've been driving by there all year and they haven't been out. So I was like, you know what? We haven't seen him yet. I got this freaking Reaper decoy. I'm like, screw it. I'm going for it. So I went down the end of the field to the south and parked and got behind the ridge in between the two fields, ran down the ridge. And of course, when I pop over the field to where they were, there's nothing there. So I didn't know if I had spooked them or if they had just moved off. And thinking about it, when I drove by, the hens were heading back to the woods. It seemed like at a pretty good clip when I was driving by. So I think
They
all the
probably took
gobblers
the
just,
cans with them, right?
yeah, I think the gobblers just followed them in. So,
Now, just for anybody that doesn't know, when you're talking about reaping them, is that big fan you have?
yeah,
That big turkey fan, you kind of get behind that. I've seen a little bit of that on YouTube and some hunting shows, but that's
So
what you're
some-
calling when you say reaping them, right?
yeah, some people use like a real fan on like, you know, a little gobbler decoy thing, you know, and just kind of carry it with them. I bought this year an umbrella that pops out and looks like a strutting tom.
Nice.
There's like a little mesh thing in the center that you can look through. So that was my first shot at that, and I got there and there was no birds. So I figured instead of push them, you know, we still had time on our side. So I bailed right out, went up north, hunted for a couple of days, came back Sunday, hunted Memorial Day over there with Mike, and we were as close as you could have been without shooting. We got in there, set up exactly how I wanted to set up. We split up probably 10 to 15 yards apart where he could see down the hill and I could see over the back of the hill. And we set some decoys out.
Set them out in the dirt field.
Yeah, but it was so windy that Monday that you could just not hear much at all on roost. And I don't know if it was because they weren't talking or because it was so windy, but it was probably, I had like 3 hens in the field and I threw out a couple of calls and then the gobbler started gobbling back the ridge from us. And I was keeping an eye because there was like 2 openings and I set Mike up on the bottom one, me up on the top one. And my legs were literally in the middle of the opening on the top one. And I was thinking to myself as a son.
Are you in a fence row?
We're just right on the edge of the woods.
Oh, okay. All right.
There is no hedgerows there or anything. So
Gotcha. Mike
we're
took
right.
it all out, right?
Yeah, no, that farm was just that set up that way that there's just fields kitty cornering themselves and then a block of woods on the northeast end, and then a block of woods on the southwest end.
Gotcha.
So that's all there is for woods. So everything in between on both sides is all field. And I was just looking down the ridge like, man, if they run right down the ridge, I am the open spot for them to come out. And they were gobbling. I had only called a couple of times. I didn't really want to get aggressive because there were so many hens around.
Yeah.
And they were coming our way anyways. And that's where I saw them a couple of days prior. So I let them come to us, and it's so windy you can't hear much. But all of a sudden I felt like I was hearing drumming, and I see a red head, and it's probably like 15 minutes after you'd think they'd hit the ground. But as you looked into the woods, it was still pretty dark. But if you looked into the field, it was like broad daylight.
Yeah, I know how that goes.
So I'm looking, and I feel like I'm hearing something. I know they were gobbling coming down the ridge, and then I see the red head, and I know damn well it's either the Jake or the gobbler. And I had my bead right on its head, and I was gonna shoot because it was only like 15 yards. And then I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, it's pretty tight to the tree I'm looking at, and Mike's to my right. So if I shoot, there could be some ricochet.
Yeah.
So I was like, that's not a smart shot. And this is one.
You know you're going to put birdshot into that tree.
Yeah. So there's one of 4 birds that I know of standing in front of me. What are the rest of them going to do? So I just let it play out, and the 2 Jakes walked right out in front of Mike, but Mike was too far. The big tree that he was on was like 2 to 3 feet inside the edge of the woods.
Yeah.
And all that foliage that was hanging out into the field totally covered the edge of the woods for him. And he wasn't seeing them till they got out a little bit and then heading downhill. So by the time he saw them, they were 45, 55 yards, somewhere in there. And obviously that's a bit of a shot. So he let them walk away, and you could tell as they were coming down the ridge, there was Jake gobbles. And then as they got close, there was the mature gobbler.
Yeah.
And he took over the goblin. And it was only 4 or 5 gobbles, but you knew he was getting close, and you knew he was here, and you knew he was coming. And I think he saw the decoy from the edge of the woods and didn't like it. And he went out in the bottom corner and went to the 2 hens down across the bottom side of the field.
There was only one longbeard in that group?
Yes.
4 the day before.
Yeah, I don't know where that 4th one went. I've been in there a few times, and I haven't seen him since. But the Jakes were going to walk away probably after 5-10 minutes, and I got aggressive with my calling, and they gave us a hell of a show. But I think they've had their ass kicked enough times that they knew not to run into the decoy.
Yeah. They came back, though, huh?
Oh, yeah. And a hen came up, and she circled right around the decoys, and she was talking to me. And the big bird was down in the lower field. He was gobbling and strutting, but just they wouldn't have it to come right up to me. So
yeah,
they ended up all heading back into the woods. I crawled over to Mike, and we were talking, and I was like, we need to get those freaking decoys out of the field. So I took my Reaper decoy, and I crawled out to the field of the Reaper decoy, and with my Reaper decoy, I crawled out into the field to the decoys, and I kind of put the Reaper decoy over them, broke them down, and then crawled back to the hedgerow. And then I handed the decoys to Mike as my fan was blocking me from the edge of the woods. And then I kind of took the fan and just crawled backwards and got back in my spot. And I was like, let's just give it 15 minutes and see if they fire back up on their own.
Yeah.
And a hen popped out like less than 2 minutes after I got back on my tree. So she had to, she had to have been in eyesight of me doing that. But then she came by, she went back into the woods, and then she came back by like 15, 20 yards away, heading out back. And after everything settled down, it was like 8 o'clock. And I told Mike, I'm like, we saw what they did. You know, we got 3 mornings this week and then the weekend. So I'm like, I don't want to get too far into him, or he had to go anyways. And I was like, let's just bail
him out of there, right?
Yeah, I'm like, let's just bail out and not educate him. So we did that. Tuesday morning, we didn't hunt. Wednesday morning, we went and hunted. And when we were leaving on Monday, we both picked trees that would put us in better shooting positions for if that same thing happened again.
Yeah.
So we got in there on Wednesday morning. And of course, the bird gobbles down the ridge. There was no hens in the field with us. And then there was more gobbles out back. And then I could tell that bird was coming down the center of the back field from our north to our south. And then I saw him in that bottom field. And then I started calling a little bit, and it brought the hens over, and it brought I think there's the Tom with 2 Jakes. They came over, but the hen poked her head over the hill, and she called, and I answered back, and she just didn't seem happy with it that there wasn't a bird standing out in the field. So she took the whole crew and headed the other way, and they were still freaking running after her, gobbling, strutting the whole 10 yards, and they had made it to about 60, and I needed just a little bit more. I could have had one. So that was.
Well, it's amazing that you're in the last week of season basically, and they're still henned up. You know, that was like the story of the year, right?
Yeah, but at least they were being active while they were henned up.
To you, responding.
Because until I found this group of birds, I did not have much of anything to go by. I think we had the one other property that we had some action on this year, but even that was tough action, you know.
Yeah, it's a matter of finding where they are and getting on them, and then you can work them until you get one.
Right. Yeah, so that was Wednesday. Thursday, we figured we'd make a couple adjustments, and what I figured was I'd go out over the hill down in the back, and I'd sit at the end of that field, and Mike would sit in the same spot. He was sitting out in the front field, and that way, whether they came down the back or they came out the ridge into the front, somebody's got them.
Right. Cover them
and
both.
I show up there at 4:20 in the morning, And by 4:30, I was texting Mike going, wakey, wakey. And
Oh,
I
that's
didn't.
okay. You overslept and he had your gun,
Yeah.
right?
So when I go hunting in the morning with Mike, I'm on my way to work, so I can't have a gun with me in my company vehicle, or I can't take it, obviously, because I work at schools. I can't take it with me.
Yeah.
So it works perfect because where we're hunting is just a couple minutes down the road from his house. So he's been taking my gun back and forth for me. And, you know, when he's done hunting, he runs home, takes the guns inside, puts them in the safe, and then he brings them out the next morning when we go hunting. So it's perfect.
Until he oversleeps.
Until he oversleeps. And I just had that gut feeling because he is always on time, always. And I just had that gut feeling as I was sitting there at 4:30, 4:35, and he wasn't answering. I'm like, oh, man, he freaking overslept, and I got nothing here. So I'm sitting there waiting for his text back, and I'm starting to hear gobbles, roost gobbles, probably around 5 o'clock. So I just crossed the road and stepped up into the field and kind of sat there on the edge of the hedgerow right next to the road. And I'm listening to him gobble and gobble and gobble and gobble. And I got a text from Mike, son of a bitch. And I'm like, hey, man, it is what it is. Shit happens. So I sat there from 5 to 6 and kind of just took another morning in of watching and seeing what was happening.
Yeah, see what they did, right?
So if I'd have had my gun and we were there on time, it would have happened first thing Thursday morning because like I thought, one in the back, one in the front, you got it covered up. It would have been perfect. So I sat there till 6. The bird was strutting, gobbling, strutting. And then he walked right into the corner that Mike normally sits in.
Oh, God.
And I'm like, all right, that's all I needed to see. I'm out of here. So I left, went to work Friday morning, or actually while I was standing there at like 6, I think it was 5:30, 6 o'clock. I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, we got 3 days left of season now because I'm not hunting today. So I'm like,
Right.
we got 3 days left of season now. I'm like, I don't have anything on my schedule for tomorrow. And my work van's broke down and the part's supposed to be in tomorrow. So I'm like, at this point, I ain't working tomorrow. So I emailed the guys at work and I'm like, hey, I got nothing on the schedule for tomorrow. Part's supposed to be in for my van. I'm like, do you mind if I take it off? And then I'll pick up my part for my van and fix my van. And they're like, yeah, it's no problem. So I took it off and I went over there Friday morning and Mike and I did the setup that we wanted to do Thursday morning. And we got in there super early. We were in there set up by 4:30. And they started gobbling probably 5:05, 5:10, and just kept gobbling and gobbling and gobbling. And they were all out back, you know, to our west.
Yeah.
And Mike was like, I can hear the gobbles over by you, but he's like, I'm not hearing anything back the bridge. And normally by 5:45, if there's something on the ridge back there, it's gobbling.
Yeah.
So I told Mike, I'm like, hurry up and get to the back corner of the woods. So he hopped inside the woods just a little bit, ran over to the back side of the woods so he could see out the back. And at that point, the birds were in the field. And Mike had texted me. He's like, am I going to spook them? Where are they? And I'm like, you're fine. I'm like, just stay in the woods and get up to the corner. And I'm like, you'll see them when you get there. And sure as shit, he texted me. He was like, oh, my God. He's like, that's a big bird. I'm like, I know. And I got this glass pot call on Thursday night from this guy at Perfect Custom Calls.
Yeah, where was he at? Down south somewhere, right?
Yeah, he's in Arkansas.
Yeah, that was interesting.
And, yeah, so when he contacted me, I was kind of, you know, he wanted to see if we wanted to be pro staff. And I'm really, you know, in our crew here at Pert Near Outdoors, I probably do the most turkey hunting. So Billy kind of said, he was like, you go ahead and take the lead on this one. I don't care what you do. So, you know, I kind of talked to the guy back and forth a little bit, and we were going to do something with our logo. And then I was like, I don't know if we should do something with our logo yet. We don't really know the guy. So I was like, why don't we just, you know, I want to try his call. You know, he came to us.
Call and try it, right?
I'm like, I'm going to get a call I don't have. And he was, you know, I asked the guy, I said, what do you prefer? Or yeah, what do you prefer? What do you recommend for a call? and he was like, I've been making these slate calls, these glass pot calls that he said they just sound fantastic. And I bought a cheap slate call this year from Cabela's, and I've used it a little bit, but I haven't really had any luck with it.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, send me one of those glass pot calls. So it got in Thursday night, and he had it scuffed up a little bit from where he tested it. And I swapped it out for that slate call. I took the slate call out of my vest and put that glass call in. And just anytime, I played with it a little bit Thursday night just to know how I had to run the striker. But that thing was so crisp. It was
really?
like anytime I touched it, that freaking bird was losing his mind. And when he first came out, I thought it was the gobbler and 3 hens. And then I realized I forgot my freaking binoculars the one day that I'm sitting in the middle of freaking, you can see for 600-700 yards.
Yeah. And you don't have
both directions, and I don't have binoculars. So I'm sitting there just watching the language of the birds. And what's happening is this one bird keeps wandering away, and then the gobbler starts going towards her, and then he starts running the other ones off. And I'm like, okay, that's 2 jakes, a gobbler, and a hen.
Yeah.
So at that time, Mike was texting me going, he's hung up with them 3 hens. He's like, he ain't coming to you. And he had binoculars. So I'm like, are you sure that's not 2 jakes and a hen? And then he texted me back and he was like, you're right. That is 2 jakes and a hen.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, good. So they were going about their thing. And I was the hedgerow that I was in is literally overgrown grass on an old power line. And there's just really tall stuff. I mean, it's 3 to 5 foot high.
Yeah.
And when I walked by, I saw that it was like a perfectly clean lane going into the telephone pole.
Yeah.
But nothing going out the other side. So just like I could walk up to the telephone pole and crouch down and I was covered.
Right.
So thinking it was going to be a quick ordeal, I just set my vest down where I could kneel on it. And I had my gun leaning up against the pole, figuring as they get closer, I can pick which side of the pole I poke my gun out.
Right.
And as the morning went on, I realized this was going to be a long ordeal. So as they started working across the field and I got after him a little bit early, and he was gobbling right back, but I realized he wasn't going to leave.
Right.
So I backed off, and I just did like every 10 to 15 minutes, I'd hit him with a little something.
Just let him know you're there, right?
Yeah, and he'd hammer right back. So I ended up letting him kind of work off. They started heading towards the back corner, and there was several times where I'm like, oh, they're gone. And then he'd bring her right back. And then it was just like constantly, like probably 200 yards away, just constantly.
So they'd go out of sight and then come back?
Well, no, they'd start to work like they were going into the woods, or they'd start to work like they were going over towards the river. And then they just like all of a sudden they're back. And I'm like, just went on and on and on. And I just kept doing that thing like every 15 minutes. I'd let him know I was there. And he finally, the 2 jakes actually laid down in the worked field.
Yeah.
Looked like
Right
they were
in the dirt?
dusting.
They sat right in the dirt? Yeah.
Yeah, they just laid right down. So the hen and the gobbler worked off towards the river, and the jake stayed there. And then Mike left because he was like, if they come any closer to me, I don't want to screw this up, and I got to be out of here in 20 minutes.
Right.
So he left. And then as the birds worked off towards the river, I started matting stuff down around the pole. And I slid my vest around the pole to where I could have my back to it facing north so I could shoot west.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
It does. Yeah.
So as I'm sitting, I finally get sat down, so I'm comfortable. And then Mike left, and then 2 more birds came from Mike's side. And I didn't have binoculars, so I couldn't really tell, but I'm pretty sure they were hens.
Yeah.
And they came up towards the jakes, and probably 80 yards away from the jakes, they plopped down in the field. So I got 4 birds laying there in the field doing nothing. And
Just
then,
hanging out.
yeah, and then the gobbler and the hen disappeared. So I gave it a little while. Didn't bother calling for like 45 minutes. The jakes actually stood up, and when they shook, it was freaking hilarious because it was just a ball of dust.
Ball of dust, yeah.
And it's weird because you're sitting there watching them, and I didn't have binoculars on them. but they're just laying there. It didn't look like they were moving, but they must have been like churning underneath or with their wing feathers.
Yep. Working the dust in, working the dirt in.
So when they stood up and shook, it was just like two big balls of dust. It was freaking hilarious.
I've never seen that.
No. So they worked off to where the gobbler went. The two other birds finally stood up, went to where the two jakes were, and they laid back down. And then it was probably
they all hung out together?
Yeah, they hung out together.
Cool.
As Uncle Chris would say. So I gave it a little bit, and then I was like, I'm going to throw out a call. So I threw out a call, and I thought I heard a really faint gobble, but I couldn't really tell. And then I was watching the back to where they went, and I see three birds just marching together, heading my way. And I'm like, oh, there they are. And then I saw the hen further to the south of them. So all four of them.
She broke off?
No, all four of them came back together.
Oh, okay. All right.
And then they picked up the other two along the way. And at this point, I had the video camera off the tripod because I was trying to videotape all morning.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was trying to zoom in, the camera was getting caught on the twigs and shit sticking up out of the grass, and it wasn't focusing.
Yeah, it's focusing on the stuff that's 2 feet away instead of 100 yards, right?
Right. And when those birds were gone, I kind of snapped down a couple of shooting lanes, just like little over barrel width. I had snapped down one shooting lane like straight out to my west, and then another one back to my south. So if they came down the edge of the woods behind me, I'd have a shot behind me, and then I'd have a shot straight out in the field in front of me to my west. And so I had a pretty good opening, and the I think it was 5 or 6 birds. They came through that opening straight to my west together. And I took the video. I had the video camera off the tripod, so I was just videotaping them freehand. I think it came out pretty good, but I haven't had a chance to watch it back. But just to have them work across the camera together, and he was still strutting and putting on a show. So they were all heading. Yeah, they were heading for the west or the south corner of the field that they were in, where he had been hanging out all morning. And I'm like, oh, they're about to leave. So as they got into that corner, I started throwing out a couple calls, and he had gobbled a couple times. And he was answering every time, but then I lost sight of the birds, and I was like, I wonder if he's going to come up through that hayfield to the south of me and then circle around the hedgerow and come right down to my east, which would totally screw me the way I'm set up. So I sat there for a minute without calling, and all of a sudden I see his fan still down by the railroad tracks. I could just see his fan sticking up over the tracks. And I started calling, he started gobbling, and I'm like, all right, the hens are gone. I'm going to get after it. So I got after it, and he
where'd the hens go into the woods to set?
Yeah. So he just started going nuts, and it went back and forth for 4 or 5 minutes, just freaking cutting and clucking, and he was just gobbling his head off. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he just quit answering me.
You were still using that glass call, were you?
Yeah, that's all I used the whole time. So I was afraid to switch calls with how responsive he was to that call.
Yep.
And I had a mouth call in, so when he got close, I needed my hands. I could use the mouth call. Yep. But I was really afraid to switch calls with how responsive he was. So he quit answering me. So I gave it like 3, 4, 5 minutes, and I threw out another call, and he didn't answer again. And I'm like, is he freaking circling me?
Yeah, he's coming.
So I'm starting to keep an eye out behind me. And then I see 2 birds pop up on the railroad tracks, and it was the jakes, and they came over and into my field. And then I'm like, where the hell did he go? I'm still expecting him to be circling me.
Yeah.
And then like a minute later, he popped up over the railroad tracks.
Came the same way the jakes did?
He was a little bit to the south of him, but yeah, he came right up over the tracks. And then the 2 jakes were side by side, and he was like 5 yards away from them. And they just started the march up the field. And he'd stick his head way up, look around, and gobble and gobble and gobble and gobble. And they'd stick his head down, and he'd keep walking. And they'd stick his head up, and he'd just he was just gobbling his freaking head off.
How far away was he when he popped out after crossing the tracks?
He was still probably like 100, 150.
Okay, so he's out there ways.
Yeah, but you could tell they were committed at that point.
They were looking for you.
Yeah, so at that point, I had the camera back on the tripod, and I just zoomed all the way out, and I was like, just going to hope for the best, hope it catches something. I don't really care about the camera at this point.
Yeah.
So he started the march in, and he was just gobbling, strutting, head up, looking for me, back down, charge in another 10 yards, stop, strut, gobble. And then when he was like probably 50 yards out, I had decided he was coming to my center shooting lane, which was straight out to the west.
Yeah.
And the shit was so thick that I had to have the barrel like back by my chest. And I got like a 28-inch, 30-inch barrel.
Well, you mean to make the swing?
Yeah, to pick which lane he was going to.
Yeah, without moving all the grass, right?
Yeah, as he was coming across the field, I couldn't tell whether he was going to go to my south or go to my north, and both shooting lanes would have done either way. If he'd have picked south or north, I'd have had him out of one of the shooting lanes.
Just a matter of getting your gun in it.
Yeah, so I had to have my gun back until I decided which way he was going. So I finally decided he was coming north. So I slid the barrel out that lane, and then he was coming, and then the Jake actually like eased into him, and I've never seen it like right before I shot the bird. I've never seen it, but he like chest bumped that Jake, and then he gobbled right in his face, and then he went into a drum, and then he strutted around like 2 yards towards me, and then he came out of strut and he stuck his head out to gobble again, and I dumped him.
And that was it, dirt nap.
And it didn't look like I peppered his head.
Yeah.
So I kind of thought I hit him low.
Yeah.
But I mean, he buckled. He went straight down, but his head was still kind of up. So I was like, I jacked around and I took off running. And, I'm like looking at him. I'm like, I might have to shoot this thing again because it looked like pretty well alive. But he wasn't flopping. He just went, it was almost like it paralyzed him.
Yeah.
So I just ran up and stuck my foot on his head. But when I cleaned him out, I was expecting that I was going to see pellets and everything in the breast.
Some shot damage or something when you.
But I think I hit him over the head in the back, and
okay.
I paced it out afterwards. It was 45 yards, I think it was.
No, it was a good long shot.
Yeah, but it was. I was trying to be patient because you get so excited, you rush a shot.
Yeah,
and
you don't want to hurry it.
He was still coming towards me, but he was working to the right, which was north. And if he kept doing that, I was going to lose any chance at a shot.
Right.
So I and looking through that tiny little lane through the brush, as he was coming, your eyes like start playing games with you. So it's kind of hard to like tell the distance.
Yeah.
It's almost like you got
through there so long.
Yeah. It's almost like you got to shut your eyes and then open them again to kind of clear your vision out.
Yeah.
But after I shot, I was like, holy shit, that was a far shot. Maybe I should have waited a second.
Yeah.
But he was heading north, which was right. And I only had I might have got a couple more yards out of him, but if he kept going the way he was going, he'd have ended up out of my shooting lane. So
how long was it after Mike left that you shot the bird?
He left at like 6:45. I shot the bird at 8.
Yeah. So just that, and it's kind of interesting because you really never broke contact with the bird. You either had eyes on him or were hearing him almost all the time, except for when he was coming in there.
Yeah, it was about 45 minutes we had a lull.
Yeah.
And I left him alone. Other than that, it was like every 10 to 15 minutes, I'd just make him gobble. And I had eyes on him the whole time. So
how'd it make you feel to fill that tag after on the 29th of May?
That was for sure the hardest I've ever worked for a turkey in my life. Because
You talking for the season or for that bird that morning?
That season, like the whole season.
Yeah.
Like normally.
The hunt sounds like it was really exciting, though. I mean, you had great action,
yeah.
And you were watching them and they're in the fields and you had multiple birds. So it's almost more fun, right, than having like a bird drop on the ground, walk over to you, shoot them. I mean, that's rewarding. It's fun. but you really got into it.
Yeah, I mean, that was probably the longest hunt that I've ever had that ended in the kill of a turkey.
Yeah. You and I have had some long hunts on birds, but they usually don't end with a kill.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was very interesting and fun. And the other aspect of this is I've, met quite a few people and, got to know them a little bit through this podcast.
Yeah.
And the community in this is almost, the camaraderie that we were missing from this year.
Yeah.
Because normally you'd have hunting camp, and
all of us together,
everybody together, and you'd have the camaraderie. And, you guys still did that to an extent this year, but I didn't. So I was almost kind of missing that aspect. And I didn't even really think about it until Billy and Dallas had talked about it on the last podcast.
Yeah.
That this is almost filling that void.
Yeah.
And it's true because I posted a picture of that bird and I thought it was the 3 hens at the time that I posted that picture. I posted that picture hung up with 3 hens or something. And you wouldn't believe the response that I got on that on Instagram. Like everybody's like, hang in there, stick in there, wait till 9, he'll be free. Everybody's like encouraging, and then you shoot him and everybody's messaging you like, holy shit, nice job, way to stick with it, this and that. And it's like, it's all that stuff you missed out on. Or like Mike left, so he wasn't with me for the end of the hunt. Like that,
right.
That would have made the hunt to have Mike come running over at the end like, holy shit, that was awesome.
Yeah.
But, I run over there and put my foot on his head. And I'm like, holy shit, that was awesome. And I got nobody there with me.
Yeah, you're alone, but it's still awesome. It's always more fun to share that with somebody, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, like you said, you had, quite honestly, I don't know how you did it. You had a grueling season because do you keep track of how many days you went out?
I quit keeping track because I got so I get to the point, which I'm sure anybody that turkey hunts as much as I do, and I've heard a couple of people say it, on Instagram. It's like you sleep when turkey season's over.
Yeah, I know.
And it's like I was working 410s, so I didn't hunt too much in the beginning of season during the week, except for Friday, because I had Friday off. But I took that first Friday of season off. I hunted Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then I worked 410s, and then I did Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then 410s, and then I think from then on out, I think I took a couple extra days off, but it was like I never went hunting on a day off and came home and like took a nap. Like it was like I got home and it was like there was work to do, there was stuff to do.
You got you got whatever. There's always something to do, right?
I didn't get one nap the entire season. And the part of it for me is like I don't have a spot where I go that I'm like, I'm going to sit here all day long.
Yeah.
And I almost don't have the patience for it either because it's like they got to be gobbling somewhere. So I just start wandering. And it's like if I don't hear nothing by 7 a.m, I'm freaking moving. And I'll move right till noon. So it's like, people think, oh, you're just sitting out in the woods from sun up till noon. It's not that bad.
You're humping.
It is freaking exhausting.
You look like you lost weight during the turkey season.
No, I gained weight. I'm still not sure how that happened, but
probably drinking all those beers while you did Breedinum Radio.
Probably.
Well, speaking of Breedinum Radio, well, first of all, just congratulations on the bird. There isn't anybody that worked any harder for the bird this year than you. And I knew you'd close it. I don't think there's ever been a year that you haven't at least taken a bird, and usually you fill both tags. But you always get a bird. Am I wrong, or do you ever have a year when you haven't got one?
See, what normally happens is I work hard off the bat to get one. Yeah. And then once I get one, like I'll stay busy the first couple of weeks, but then towards the end of the season, I'll kind of peter out.
Yeah.
But this year, I didn't have a bird yet, and I just stayed after it.
And it was a weird season. I mean, we're in the middle of May, and we're getting snow. You're up north hunting. There's snow on the ground. It looks like you're deer hunting.
Yeah, I know. It was hard. It was hard to stick with at times, but I just kept telling myself, I was like, if you're out here enough, you're going to get a bird to screw up at some point. You got to be right place, right time. If you spend that many days in the woods, you got to end up in the right place at the right time at one of these days. You there? Did you miss all that?
I lost you a little bit there. You said right place at right time, and then I don't know if you dropped or I dropped. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I don't know if that heard me all on here or not, but I was just saying, like, the only thing that kept me going was I just felt like at some point, if I spent that much time in the woods,
it's going to happen.
It's going to happen. But
yeah.
the other part that was super hard to that is it almost felt like I didn't even know what I was doing turkey hunting.
Just because it was so hard getting on the birds?
Yeah. And I'm like, I've done this so long, like I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But I just can't make it happen. And
you just had to stay on it.
I'd almost like halfway through the season, I just kind of put it in my head that I'm like, doesn't matter if it happens, you love being out in the woods, whatever, it is what it is. And I just kept going. And then for it to happen within the last 3 days of season, I'm like, God, that felt good.
Yeah. Well, we'll kind of circling back, talking about the Breedinum Radio and your first stint as host on that. Why don't we kind of wrap up with a little chat about that? So why don't you tell us what you thought of the hosting? Billy's been doing this for a while, and on occasion you and I are on, but you kind of ran the show here. What'd you think of it?
It's funny because this is something that I would never consider, myself doing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't like reaching out to strangers. I don't like, not strangers like weird people, but like strangers like people I haven't met before.
Yeah.
And just like trying to coordinate stuff. And it's just something that I never really figured I'd do. And I didn't really want to do it, to be honest with you.
You didn't, no.
But with Billy having a kid and stuff, and we want to make this happen, and they say with this podcast stuff, it's, you have to be consistent.
Right. Consistency is important.
Yeah.
Get your content out there.
I understand with, Billy having his baby and stuff and needing a hand. I'm like, you know what? I'm like, turkey season is kind of my thing,
Yeah.
Billy deer hunts and stuff, and Billy, he's like you. He can bullshit about anything.
This is your forte.
Yeah. So I was actually really excited to do this. And it's funny because right off the bat, I was like, oh, first week will be the Harvey family, because first week we're going to lay them down.
Not this year.
And none of us killed one. I think Joe was the only one that killed one. And he wasn't in our competition. I was trying to go off our list. So I started going off our list, and I tell you, the people that I met and talked to, and, relationships I feel I've met or made, and I appreciate the time that people took out of their schedule to make it happen for us, because it was really cool.
And, it was good content. I mean, they were great conversations, and, of course we're all like-minded, right? We're all outdoorsmen. We all enjoy the turkey woods. And, you mentioned the contest that you guys ran here at Pert Near Outdoors and to benefit the National Wild Turkey Federation. And I got to tell you, that was awesome. And, at the end, having your scores out there and everything. And it was, that was just a great way. Again, I talked about the podcast adding another dimension to the turkey season, but the contest did too. It was just a lot of fun, and seeing the birds that people got and watch how people were making out on the leaderboard. And so, kudos to you guys for putting that together.
Yeah, it was fun. When I did that calling contest for BHA.
Yeah, that was.
And I didn't expect to be able to make a call, or even like compete, because I can call turkeys, but I'm not breaking any world records on. I don't.
Calling contests are usually not what you do, right? So.
Yeah, like I'm not. Listening to this stuff, learning, what each little call means, and how to do this and that. So I'm like, I don't know, I can run a mouth call pretty good, and but like the whole thing ended up mouth call, but like I can run a box call pretty good. But it was funny because I'm actually going to give a lot of credit to BHA.
Yeah.
Because even as this thing went on, like I followed it all the way through,
mm-hmm.
and I made it to the last round in New York. and another fella from up near Westkill Brewing. He took New York.
He was good. Both of you and him. I mean, just the theatrics. When he was sitting at the bar, I don't know if it was in his lodge or his house, and he's calling a little bit, and then you see this turkey foot slide a beer out to him.
So it's funny because, like, I was getting a little creative, and his previous videos, he wasn't creative.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if I'm creative, I'm gonna win this.
Yeah, because people love that.
And then Billy sends me a message. He's like, "Oh boy," he's like, "He got creative," and I'm like, "Good." I'm like, "That's the way I want it to be." So,
no, that was fun. That was fun.
That was a good time. But my point with the BHA contest, like, they had some bigger name people, doing the judging towards the end.
Yeah.
And it was not about the best, like, you have to be a professional caller.
Right.
It was about who was out there, who was doing good, who was getting creative.
Yeah.
It wasn't all about, you have to be a professional caller.
You have to be the perfect caller. That's not what it was about, right?
And watching that all the way through, I give a lot of credit to BHA because that was a very involving competition. It wasn't making people feel like they shouldn't compete because it's only really, really good callers.
Right. Didn't scare people away. Your average Joe felt, it was fun to jump in the mix there, right?
Yeah. Yep. So to that, I give them kudos because that was a good job of that. But on the tail end of that, we had a lot of people messaging us, saying, "You guys got to do something like that. If we'd have known about it, we'd have got in on it."
Yeah.
And Billy called me, and I'm like, "We're hedging turkey season here." I'm like, "It's almost too late to do a calling competition."
Right.
And everybody and their brother's doing them right now. So I'm like, why don't we actually put together a competition? And then this is where it ended up leading. So Billy had the idea to put it together, benefiting National Wildlife Turkey Federation. And we worked with Brian Godfrey to kind of get that set up. And I couldn't be happier with it. I was blown away that, $1,200.
Yeah,
that we raised it. It's been a tough year, for any of these places.
Yeah, and you should mention, I think you had some sponsors too that provided like prizes, right?
Yeah, and Billy's listed all those off, and he's been more involved in getting those guys. So, I think there was Whitetail Company.
Kudos to those folks that partnered with you.
Yeah, there was Whitetail Company. There was National Wildlife Turkey Federation. Billy's buddy there. I'm gonna screw the name up, so I'm not even gonna try it. But what's that?
Was it Bo?
No, it was one of the guys from Hunter's Creek there.
Oh, okay.
But they do the European mounts, so he donated a European mount.
Nice.
We had a free Onyx membership.
Yeah.
So just, it wasn't big stuff, but it was just stuff to get involved in, something to do something with.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a good time.
I definitely met a lot of people and had a really good time with it.
Yeah, and thanks to everybody for playing along with that, right? Because everybody from our sponsors to the people that, and really, it's a win-win deal. We had a lot of fun. A lot of people got involved, and, we were able to make a nice donation to the National Wild Turkey Federation.
Yeah.
So, that it was a win-win deal, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I had an absolute blast with it, and I thank everybody that participated.
Yeah.
Definitely had a lot of fun getting to know everybody and getting to hear everybody's story. It was a great time.
Yeah. So when you looking back on the Breedinum Radio, and your time putting this together this spring, was there anything that you would have done differently? Did you get some takeaways from this?
I think one of the biggest things is, like, when I'm interviewing people and they're telling me their story, I want to tell them my story. So, like, listening back to all these episodes, because I do, like, every time Billy posts them, I go on and listen to them while I'm driving for work or whatever. And the one thing I've found is it's like I kind of start to repeat myself. Like some of this story about my bird here, I told little tiny chunks of it last week because I want to conversate. Like, once we start bullshitting about hunting, it's like I'm in. I want to relate. I want to tell you.
Well, you're a storyteller, Jim. You are.
So
and you remember great detail, but it's So that's one thing that you would maybe. Well, and you know, when you listen to yourself, it's almost like if you do presentations and you watch a video of yourself, you kind of critique and get better, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, when you said that you really didn't want to do this in the beginning, it's not kind of your thing, but you know, it was good for you to step up and do it. And, you know, now you know, probably more your thing now. You wouldn't be as hesitant to do it, you know, next year for spring turkey season, you know?
Yeah, and there's also other people that I've made contact with through this that we're going to do some podcasts this summer. Just, you know, it's like, hey, you mind if we hook up and do a podcast? You know, what's your podcast about? What are you guys trying to cover? I'm like, it's Log Talk Podcast. Like, we will shoot the shit about anything you want to shoot the shit about. So right. I'm like, absolutely, we'll get together and do something. So we got a couple more coming from that have generated out of this, which is good. So
yeah, well, and that's, you know, that you talked earlier about consistency and being able to keep putting the content out there. And so it's good when you like you did this and you met more people, and that helps you to, you know, foster further conversations and content. So so that's good. So summarizing, you know, it's hard to believe it's behind us. It seems like we were just sitting here having a couple drinks and doing our YouTube live Turkey Talk Radio. Yeah. And I think that in the snap of a finger, all of a sudden we're in June. So how would you summarize your 2020 spring turkey season, Jim?
A lot of miles and one turkey.
So somebody mentioned one time about your beards to beers ratio, but if you put your pounds of meat to miles traveled and hours put in, right? So
oh God, that's not even funny. But if you go beers to turkey ratio, there's a lot of beers to turkey. I can tell you that much.
Well, it was a good season, and I'll turn it back over to you to close. Thanks for having me as a host, and I really enjoyed not only the turkey season itself, but the fun chats. And I got to tell you, I get a big kick out of the intro to the turkey season, the Breedinum Radio series. Billy really outdid himself with that one. So
yeah,
but I'll turn it back over to you. Thanks for a great season and all the entertainment. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks for hopping on here and interviewing me on mine. It was funny because I was like, well, if Dad doesn't show up tonight, I'm just gonna have to interview myself. And I don't know how much fun that would have been for people, but
that was good.
No,
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, that intro that Billy made, everybody thinks that he used like an audio editor.
No, not Billy.
No, that's just Billy.
Yeah.
So I guess just to end this thing off, I'll thank everybody again, and I appreciate everybody that hopped on and participated in our competition. And for everybody that didn't, congratulations on the bird you got. Sorry we didn't hook up with you, but if you want to hook up with us here in the future to do anything, just contact us here on Instagram or Facebook. We'd be more than happy to hook up and help you out or do some podcasts with you or whatever you guys want to do. So
sounds great.
At the end of turkey season here, they ain't breeding them no more.
No. Breeding them's done. Now we're on to feeding them.
Yep. So until next time, keep feeding them.
Keep feeding them.
Thanks, Dad.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. I hope that you enjoyed the conversation. Make sure to give us a rating and a review on whatever platform you are listening on, if that is possible, and if you'd so feel encouraged to do so. And if you'd like to support the podcast, the best way to do that is to use the link in our Instagram or Facebook profile. It is a link tree, and feel free to shop at any of the stores that you see on there. We are doing some work with Camo Fire and Cabela's and Black Ovis, and I feel like there's a few others that I'm probably not listing. Mountain Ops is one of them. If you shop at any of those stores through those links, we will get a little piece of that action, and it helps keep this puppy rolling. So thanks again. Let us know if you have any questions or anything you'd like us to cover, and have a good one. Feed 'em.